We bought 3 of the cheapest pit bikes or dirt bikes off of Amazon. They're all 125cc. They're all a stupid deal, and we're gonna go over them on the channel today, and it's kind of hard to believe that these are only about $1,000. All right, so first up, we have the 125cc X-Pro Storm. This is a smaller bike. This has a 14-inch front wheel, a 12-inch rear wheel. Now this is perfect if you have a kid under the age of, we'll say 13, 14. It's just the right height for them. The rear shock is adjustable. You can make it softer or stiffer depending on their weight. So my kiddo is about 100 pounds and the rear shock is at its softest setting and it's perfectly fine for her. So with that said, this bike is kind of medium in size. It's not one of the tiny bikes and it's not one of the full-size adult bikes. More on that in a second, but this thing is a bargain. So this one comes without a clutch. It is a semi-automatic. With that said, there is a shifter lever on this side. And when you're teaching your kiddo how to ride it, you're going to have to show them that they have to bump it up into first gear, hold the bike back with their feet or the front brake or even the back brake, which is a lever on this side. They can hold it back like an automatic as long as you have the idle set correctly. So with that said, it's pretty much an automatic when starting off. As long as you have it in first gear, you hold it back and then you throttle out of it. So with that said, your kid is going to ride around in first gear. It's going to sound crazy because it's going to rev really high. So you just need to show them that they have to bump it up into second, third, and fourth gear. So neutral is all the way at the bottom, which is kind of strange. It's like that on all of these Chinese bikes from what I've seen. I don't know why they do that, but it is completely different than, we'll say, a Honda or a Yamaha or any of the other big name brands. So with that said, X-Pro, SSR, Apollo, a lot of those companies, it seems like all the bikes are made in the same factory. They all have the same engine. In fact, I've seen identical bikes from all of these Chinese companies, just with different plastics, different decals on them, different names. So keep that in mind. You might find an SSR that looks just like the X-Pro X9. So with that said, this engine is exactly the same as the engine on the X9. Now the X9 is more of a medium-sized bike. This is perfect for your wife or yourself. It just depends on how much you want to spend. So these go for, or I should say the Storm goes for about $589. This goes for slightly more if I remember correctly, and then shipping, because it's freight shipping, is going to be about $399. So I'll insert a clip here and show you what these look like when they show up. They show up in a crate. You do have to assemble them a little bit, and I will say there are a couple of things I would do to them right off the bat to make them extremely reliable. With that said, you can ride it in its stock form. We are above 6,000 feet in altitude, so we have to keep the choke halfway on. It's just a byproduct of this garbage carb that these come with. So a lot of people throw a Mikuni or a Mikuni clone carb on these, like a VM22. I will link a video that I made of how to swap this carburetor out and this air filter to both a better product that will idle, you'll have smooth throttle, things like that. So you can spend, you know, about $1,000 with shipping on these bikes, spend another $50, $60 and make the thing extremely reliable just by swapping out a couple of parts. So with that said, the X9 looks almost identical to an SSR model. It has the same 125cc 4-stroke engine, so there's no mixing 2-stroke gas. Same thing with the Storm 125. This one does have a manual transmission, so you will have a clutch up here. It's easy enough. Neutral is all the way at the bottom, just like on the Storm. You bump it into first gear, then you have to push the clutch, bump it into second, third, fourth. With that said, it says you have to be completely off the throttle. With both of these bikes, I've noticed I can upshift on throttle. It does jump the bike forward a little bit. It's probably not great for the bike, but you can also downshift without using the clutch or barely touching the clutch. So with that said, that might be a byproduct of the clutch cable being a little too tight. That is adjustable. Everything on these bikes is adjustable. But I will say that you can downshift these without hitting the clutch, which is really nice if you come up on a tight turn or something and you need that low end torque. So with that said, these are 4-stroke. They have a shocking amount of torque for a 125. They are great starter bikes, great for teaching someone how to ride, both the semi-automatic where you still have to shift gears but you don't have that clutch function, which that can be better at teaching a kid or a wife or a teenager how to ride a manual bike, because most kids are used to a front brake on like a bicycle being on the left handle grip. So with that said, that not being there, them being forced to use the right handle grip for the front brake and this lever here for the rear brake, it's a good way to teach them and to step them into a manual bike. So with that said, both of these bikes are under $1,000 shipped. They're $930, $950 dollars on Amazon.com. If you go to X-Pro's website, they're a little bit more expensive, but they also have free freight shipping through there. So it's kind of do your math on it. We ordered these through Amazon. This isn't a sponsored video or anything. I just want to give you a comparison between the two. With that said, I've already upgraded the carburetor to the VM22. Again, I'll link that video. Because this one wouldn't idle properly, I'm actually upgrading all 3 of these bikes. So you got a bike for your kid, you got a bike for your teenager or your wife, now you want a bike for yourself. So you could jump straight into like a 250 from either a Chinese manufacturer or a Japanese manufacturer. If you have the money for a Japanese bike, I'd say get one. But at the same time, if you're not sure if you're gonna stick with this or it's your first time riding, get a Chinese bike. That way if you break it, you won't feel so guilty about it. So now you want to get a bike for yourself, and this is the bike I chose to ride with my family with. So this is an Apollo 125. It's branded the RFZ as the model. So all the Chinese manufacturers have an RFZ model. Apollo has one, X-Pro has one, I believe SSR has one. They all have one. They're nearly identical, but I've noticed with the RFZ, they do change subtle things about it. So the seats are a little different. These are considerably more comfortable than they are on the other X-Pros, the smaller X-Pros. The plastics are different. The front fork comes completely disassembled when you get the bike. So if you've never put a bike together, that might be a little bit of a learning curve. You can do it. It's a little bit more in depth. This one has a 14-inch front wheel, 12-inch rear wheel. It does have a throatier, deeper sounding exhaust. This sounds like a proper large bike. It does have a coilover adjustable rear shock on it, so you can adjust the height on it, which is fantastic, especially if you are a taller rider. You have the ability to adjust it up without getting a larger size bike. With that said, this bike also has the same engine as the X-Pro 125s. The on-off switch is a little different. It's not a switch that you have to hold down like on the X-Pros. It'll stay on or off like that. The key is a folding key on this one. The kickstart's a little different. It does have a frame guard. The swing arm in the back is a little bit higher quality than the X-Pros, but then again, you are paying about $200 more with shipping for this bike over the X9 and the Storm 125. So with that said, the carburetors, the VM22 upgrade will fit this along with all the other popular carburetor upgrades that you can put on this bike. So the carburetor that came on this one, the RFC, is adjustable unlike the X-Pro 125s. So that's very nice if you're trying to adjust that fuel air mixture based on altitude, get it idling correctly. I went ahead and upgraded this one anyways. It's kind of interesting because the carburetor, the 90-degree elbow for it makes it sit between the frame. So you have to be really careful when you put a air filter on here where your air filter sits. This is the carburetor and air filter that comes on the RFZs. It is a paper filter with a metal mesh. It gets extremely hot sitting next to the exhaust, but these filters are absolute junk. So one of the first things I would do is swap this out. This is the return hose for the crankcase pressure. It's for emissions. If you're in California, don't disconnect this hose. Nothing really comes out of that hose though, I've noticed. I have never seen any oil come out of that crankcase pressure breather, but it does route it back in so that those vapors can be burned off inside the carburetor. I usually just leave that hose open. And again, I've never seen oil come out of it. But I would delete this air filter if you get this bike. This is your fuel air mixture here if you want to adjust the idle on this bike. Again, it's got a choke and it's 3 settings. Because we're above 6,000 feet, this carburetor, and this is very similar to the carburetors on the X-Pro 125s, these bikes would only run at half choke. We would start them in full choke, put them in half choke, and we'd have to leave them there because if we turn the choke completely off, the bikes would all die. So that's just inherent because of altitude. Honestly, all the carbs need rejetted. They're designed to work at sea level. So, but most people that ride dirt bikes, in my opinion, live above sea level. With that said, if you do get this bike, spend an extra 20, 30 bucks, upgrade the carb, spend another 20 bucks and upgrade the air filter. I prefer the UNI air filters. This is a 2-stage. You can oil this filter. You just kind of oil up a rag and you roll it in it. So I highly recommend that for all of these bikes, even though the X-Pro bikes do come with a nice little black air filter that's higher quality than what the RFZ comes with. So keep that in mind. There are some subtle small upgrades I would do to these bikes if you plan to keep them reliable and you plan to enjoy them. With that said, the tires. The tires are the last thing I'm going to talk about with these bikes. So the tires are pretty good from the factory. The X9 comes with the best tires. It has some pretty hardcore nubs that are great for sand or mud. The RFC, they're okay. They're more of an all-terrain tire. Same thing with the Storm 125. So these tires are going to do great for almost everything you want to do. If you're getting in really deep sand or really deep mud, I would say go ahead and upgrade these. These bikes will all do 50 plus miles per hour. If you have a young child that you're trying to teach on the Storm, you can control how much throttle they have by tightening this screw here so they can't give it full throttle. That's really good when you're trying to teach them not to whiskey throttle it so they don't throw themselves off the bike. So this is a very good bike for teaching a kid anywhere from 9 to 13, 14 years old. I even ride this bike every now and then, especially after I do something to it. Honestly, the suspension might be slightly too soft for me. It is an adjustable rear shock, so I could make it stiffer and ride it just fine. I would just look a little goofy. So one thing I will add is when you pull these bikes out of the crate and you assemble them, I recommend this with any dirt bike, but it's especially true with the Chinese dirt bikes. You want to get yourself a bottle of Thread Locker Blue, and you want to put this on all the little nuts and bolts as you assemble it together. That goes from the axle to all the adjustments on the handlebars. When you actually bolt the handlebars on, you want to use blue Loctite on there. Basically, so the vibration doesn't shake any of those bolts loose. I will add, all 3 bikes have hydraulic disc brakes, which are super nice. They're not cable driven. They're considerably higher quality than I expected for the price. So keep that in mind. Would I buy them again? Yes. Definitely put a carburetor and some air filters on them. I will say that we assembled 2 more of these bikes for one of our friends, and when we did that, one of their handlebar threads were completely stripped out from the factory, so we had to run to the store and get a longer Allen head bolt. Other than that, as far as assembly goes, everything was super easy on that. Out of the 5 bikes we assembled, 1 had a quality control issue. If you're willing to bolt on a carburetor and an air filter, maybe change the tires down the road, they're fantastic bikes. So thanks for watching the video today. I'm gonna make a couple more videos on these bikes for you guys, so subscribe to the channel. If you're into other like DIY kind of stuff, how-to guides, I make a lot of those here on this channel. So thanks for watching today.